The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Welcome everyone. We're really glad that you're here today. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. My name is Julie Morse, and I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Swan Island Networks. I would also like to introduce my colleague, Miranda Uris, who will be presenting with me this morning. Miranda is lead Intel analyst on our team here at Swan Island. And this is the fourth in a series of webinars we've given on topics that our team has identified and researched to help your organization address the threats of today's world. And we all know that those are many. So today we'll focus on a very timely topic, and that is the upcoming wildfire season and tackling potential challenges this year, including the ongoing COVID-19 situation and the recovery, and how that will impact wildfire response. We will also highlight the utility of our Intel sourcing and TX Global software service and how we use these in monitoring complex issues such as the wildfires. If you do have questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat window. You'll see that on the right side of the screen in the GoToMeeting panel. And we'll definitely do our best to answer those questions in the Q&A period at the end of the session. And just as a logistics thing, everybody is muted except for the presenters here. And as you all know, we are broadcasting from home. So if you do hear dogs barking, I have a puppy. And I'm sure many of you can relate to those type of interruptions. Hopefully it won't happen today. So with that, let's go over the agenda real quick. So we'll begin today's webinar with an overview of the topic, wildfires as a global threat, and a review of recent history. We'll look at the forecast for the 2020 season, specific conditions, and then we'll recognize some of the new challenges and very unique considerations for this year in particular. Finally, we'll review sources and strategies to successfully manage this complex threat landscape and do so despite the added impacts of COVID-19 and other challenges. We're going to do that by looking through our new service, TX Global. And then finally, we'll finish with a Q&A session. So that's a brief overview of what to expect. And with that, I will hand it over to Miranda, and she's going to walk us through the first portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you everyone for joining us today as we look at possibly one of the most challenging wildfire seasons ever. So while wildfires do play a critical role in our healthy forest management, they kind of become a problem when people and property are threatened. Former National Director of Fire and Aviation for the U.S. Forest Service, Jerry Williams, coined the term megafire in the early 2000s to describe the kinds of fires that are becoming the norm for us today, marked by unprecedented suppression costs, property losses, natural resource damages, and loss of life as more and more human populations move into these high fire risk zones as a result of urban sprawl. The pressure to suppress wildfires grows right alongside this wildland-urban interface. On top of this, climate change is exacerbating the same conditions that are most conducive to wildfire spread: high temperatures, dry air, and dry fuels. In 2016, the National Academy of Sciences found that the number of acres burned each year in the US has doubled thanks to more extreme temperatures and droughts, shorter winters, lessened snowpack, and pests like the pine beetle. This also means that wildfire season, generally defined as the time between the year's first and last large wildfires, is growing months longer, and in some places, not really ending at all. In the western US, on top of the doubling in acres burned, wildfires have increased 400% in frequency. Only about 4% of these have natural causes such as lightning. Most fires, and especially the most harmful ones in that wildland-urban interface, can be traced back to human activities like unattended campfires, debris burning, downed power lines, discarded cigarettes, and even arson. This chart here highlights the dramatic losses from US wildfires in the 2017 and 2018 seasons, mostly from the fires in California. In fact, the top 10 costliest US wildfires have all occurred in California, 6 of those since 2017. Wildfires are a global threat. They have far-reaching, at times cross-border consequences, and they require coordination on the local, tribal, state, federal, and sometimes even international levels. Severe wildfire smoke can disrupt international flights, halt tourism, close schools, and spark a public health crisis, even hundreds or thousands of miles from the flames. The Southeast Asian haze, for example, caused by slash and burn clearing, closed schools in Malaysia and Indonesia and canceled flights across the region last year. Airlines similarly had to cancel flights during Australia's recent bushfire season. Wildfires and their smoke can ravage supply chains and logistics, creating health hazards for workers, as well as major and sudden road closures and visibility issues for vehicles that slows the movement of goods. Wildfire season also has a hand in worsening climate change through this positive feedback loop, where major volumes of CO2 are emitted. Australia's bushfires this past season released twice as much CO2 as the country's entire emissions from burning fossil fuels that year. So this is a timeline of the past few years of wildfires, and they've been marked by a number of record-setting fires around the world by every metric. Places that often see wildfires are seeing their region's worst fires ever. No matter what country or state, there's a common set of conditions to these fires: heat waves and droughts, unusual precipitation patterns, and major wind events that quickly spread flames out of control. In 2017, California experienced almost 10,000 fires, including the Tubbs Fire in Sonoma and Napa counties and the enormous Thomas Fire in Ventura County. Estimates place the economic cost of that season at $180 billion. Heat waves across Europe and Australia helped to fuel some of the worst fire seasons ever. In 2018, the Attica fires in Greece killed at least 102 people. That same year, British Columbia saw massive fires, the largest of which was 3.3 million acres, almost twice as big as California's biggest fire ever, a conglomerate of several fires that grew together called the Mendocino Complex. And last season, the Kincaid Fire prompted the largest evacuation in Sonoma County history, despite massive power shutoffs by PG&E to prevent new fire starts. Most recently, as you can see here, Australia fought through its harrowing black summer, which was the hottest summer on record, as well as the worst bushfire season. The staggering losses from that season might not be fully understood for years. This year's fire season has already begun. Florida has seen evacuation orders and homes destroyed, and 200 fires have been logged in Washington and Oregon. And it's important to note that predictions for this season can't really account for some of those crucial short-term weather impact patterns, like lightning or heat waves, strong offshore wind events. And these wild cards can rapidly change a wildfire season's course for the better or for the worse. Right now, anyway, officials are less worried about Southern and Central California, thanks to an abundant late season rainfall and below average temperatures. However, an uptick in fires is likely in June as fuels dry out this summer. Thanks to below average snowpack and forecasted hot and dry conditions this summer, above average fire activity is expected for Northern California, as well as Oregon, Washington, the Great Basin, and parts of Alaska. Western Canada is expecting similar conditions and may also experience above normal fire activity. As the wildfire season here in North America gets underway, it's important to consider how a global pandemic is going to affect our firefighting efforts and how, in turn, the wildfire season will impact those at risk or suffering from COVID-19. There are, of course, a lot of unknowns as we merge these crises types. We don't know everything about the novel coronavirus and how the coming months will develop, but we can make some predictions based on what we do know. A primary concern is going to be wildfire smoke. Anyone who's experienced wildfire firsthand can attest to the unpleasant or downright dangerous air quality. Wildfire smoke can hurt your eyes, irritate your respiratory system, and worsen chronic heart and lung diseases. On top of that, older people and those with respiratory issues are at highest risk, the same vulnerable groups for COVID-19. In fact, early research suggests that air quality is a major contributor to coronavirus mortality. Research from the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health conducted a nationwide study of county-level data and found that even a small increase in the amount of PM 2.5, which are fine particles also found in wildfire smoke, from one U.S. county to the next was associated with a large increase in the death rate from COVID-19. The same N95 respirators often used to protect workers and residents from wildfire smoke are now scarce due to the pandemic. Stockpiles reserved for wildfire season were donated to help give healthcare workers much needed PPE, which may create competing demands among healthcare and wildfire frontline workers if a plan for managing these resources isn't implemented ahead of time. Typical indoor facilities like community centers and gyms offering respite from smoke may remain closed or with limited capacity. Smoke could also increase the risk that wildland firefighters will develop severe COVID-19 symptoms themselves. In fact, protecting the health of firefighting personnel must be a primary goal if you want to protect people and property from fires this year. That might prove to be an uphill battle. Fire crews will have to adapt their response in every way to align with social distancing guidelines, which may prove impossible in spaces like fire engines, aircraft, helicopters. Frontline firefighters are often younger, so many of them could contract COVID-19 and be asymptomatic, but still able to spread the virus to rural community members, older volunteer firefighters, ranchers, and perhaps most seriously, to one of the Type 1 incident managers. These mere 16 individuals are responsible for the entire United States and coordinate the response to Type 1 incidents like 2018's Camp Fire. And in the past, firefighting camps have housed as many as 6,000 personnel. They're accessed by even more people, such as paramedics, inmates, law enforcement, journalists, government officials, and private vendors. Camp Crud, as it's known, has proved to be a problem in the past in such camps, anything from raging athlete's foot to a bad case of the flu. Communal water jugs, shared tables and outhouses, close quarters, and a lack of access to soap, water, and sanitizers make it easy for a bug to spread rapidly. This year, they can't afford for that bug to be the coronavirus. The long incubation period of COVID-19 also makes it hard to react quickly. The firefighting force in the US is a transient one, but coronavirus will make it really hard to move personnel around quickly without risking further spread of the virus. Additionally, states usually rely heavily on firefighters from around the country, along with the National Guard, to help combat wildfires, but many of those are now assigned to the COVID-19 response, or they're out of service in isolation or quarantined. For this year, officials are estimating as much as a 20% decrease in availability of firefighting personnel. Furthermore, reinforcements from other states or other countries have been called in to fight mega fires in recent years, but because of the pandemic, it might not be possible to rely on that support. So what measures can be taken? So far, programs and trainings have been canceled to limit spread. As the season ramps up, there will probably be smaller and closed access campsites with more hand washing stations, possibly mobile shower units and single person tents. Crews may be more strictly assigned to a single vehicle, Personnel should have access to both thermometers and coronavirus test kits. Protocols for quarantining and removing infected firefighters from the field should not only be implemented but practiced ahead of time. And there must be policies on traveling to and from training sites, working within communities, and traveling from camp. Social distancing may not always be possible, so protective gear such as face masks should be made available and their use encouraged. Even further complicating this year's firefighting efforts are the economic impacts on budgets from the pandemic so far. Budget cuts on local, tribal, state, and federal levels due to COVID-19 will lead to reduced resources to mitigate and combat fires. Public Lands Commissioner Hilary Franz, back in April, requested $86.6 million in new federal funding for forest thinning, response capacity, and PPE for firefighters, but no federal action has been taken on that request. In California, one of the budget cuts the government is proposing will impact CAL FIRE workers. Another primary issue during any natural disaster, of course, is how and where to shelter evacuees. Many buildings usually converted into shelters are closed due to COVID-19 measures. Food, usually supplied by restaurants to feed evacuees, are closed or working in limited capacity, and the typical buffet-style meals will not be acceptable this time around. Social distancing at these shelters is difficult, if not impossible, and in past years, it has been common to see outbreaks of things like norovirus among wildfire evacuees. Beds, usually stacked close to one another, will have to be spread out, limiting the number of people each shelter can hold. One proposed plan is the use of empty hotels to make up for lost capacity at traditional shelters. Last year, millions of Californians were impacted by shutoff events by utilities like PG&E and SCE to prevent wildfire sparks during extreme wind events. These events were at times chaotic, marked by failures by cellular carriers, ISPs, and other providers. Especially in rural areas, these shutoffs complicate emergency notification to residents. Hospitals must also prepare for possible shutoffs on top of their response to COVID-19. Hopefully, the increased need for internet, phones, and other essential services during these stay-at-home orders have given time for workforces and providers to prepare for more shutoff events like this year. California is also looking at possible paths for the pandemic this year, and where new waves of coronavirus may coincide with wildfire season. The wind events, known as the Santa Ana and Diablo winds, typically ramp up in October, downing trees and power lines and spreading wildfires really fast. In some models, a second, possibly even larger wave of COVID-19 could strike this fall. Dealing with peaks in both crises at the same time could be disastrous, especially without a plan in place. But regardless of forecast models for either of these crises, we need to start preparing now for the reality of wildfire season amid a pandemic. Of course, that's really hard. People are tired and overwhelmed from hearing about COVID-19 all the time. And in the past, communities in places like California feel burnout, seemingly endless wildfires, mudslides, flooding, and earthquakes. The Thomas Fire back in 2010's holiday season was shortly followed with the deadly mudslides in Montecito just days later. Many of those victims were experiencing this evacuation fatigue after weeks of shuffling from shelters to friends' homes and back again, which was especially taxing for older evacuees and those with medical conditions. Similar stories were heard out of Paradise later that year. It's true that COVID-19 has tested resiliency like nothing in memory. The combined stress and fatigue and mental overload from the pandemic and now wildfire season raises health risks for everyone, especially responders and the medically vulnerable. So it's of utmost importance that people aren't complacent and that we take every reasonable measure today to protect health and safety for everyone.
Thank you, Miranda. This is very informative, and it's really helpful as we enter this season to have that kind of big picture of our current fire season conditions, both in the US and around the world, as well as the various ways that that might impact response. We all know that these really are unprecedented times, but the attention that we can give to planning ahead for the known threats, especially such as fires, amid the season will definitely pay off and will allow us to be better able to manage these situations as they arise. So, preparing for the double threat. Let's talk about what we can do. So, looking at the threat landscape 2020, we recognize that on any given day, this is the landscape of threats that a global corporation may be facing. Usually it's one or two at a time, maybe a few, but on a small scale or really isolated conditions around the world. But today, with the global pandemic having overtaken things the last 8 to 10 weeks, we're definitely in uncharted waters. So as many of you know, we're also entering natural disaster season. That's why many of you are here today. And this includes wildfires, but it also includes the tornadoes, which have already been going, hurricane season, and tropical storms as well. So those are ramping up. So this presents unique challenges this year, and we know everyone is working to adapt and focus their efforts around that at this time. So we are right there with you. We're doing our best to support all of our clients with the right balance of threat intelligence and monitoring, as well as preparation for these known threats. So today we're focusing on the specific threat of wildfires and how that may play out amid the current landscape. Just to step back a minute and talk about situational awareness and threat monitoring, we talk about this as a means to anticipate, mobilize, and respond in order to safeguard lives, property, continuity of business, and even reputation. So in fact, George Washington recognized this in the early days of the country when he actually dedicated part of his budget to intel gathering. In a crisis, we want to minimize the time between first detection and our reaction to it, being ready with the information that will allow us to act fast when it counts. It may be important to integrate situational awareness and threat monitoring with other response methods which are unique for each organization. For example, incident management, a unified command system, or your mass notification tools. And of course, very important to communicate clearly across the organization and even with customers or partners, supply chain, or government. You'll want to share targeted versions of information to different groups depending on the sensitivity level as well as that particular relationship. So we think of the threat cycle in 4 pieces here. The blue sky days, very clear. Those are those nice times that allow us to plan, think, create, and even practice. Moving into that second, the gray sky days, this is where there's an identified threat. And that means turning up the monitoring, tuning in the sources, doing some contingency planning. And this is definitely where we're at with natural disaster season and wildfire season included. Gray sky days have known threats, and usually there's annual or seasonal plans, for example, as well as assigned roles. Now, black sky days, that's where we have been with COVID-19. Very rare, but serious, and we've been right in the middle of it. Everyone has been reacting, responding, adapting, as well as uncovering some of the cascading effects. The good news is we're seeing the signs of a new dawn from COVID-19, and some states are reopening and their reversals are starting, so things will begin to be looking up there. Some of you may be familiar with our flagship product, TX360. It's our enterprise software platform, does threat monitoring and situational awareness, and it is highly customizable. It's tunable to the finest detail of your security operations, provides hyper-local monitoring even to the fraction of a mile where needed, and it supports hundreds of assets and users. So we've recently introduced a new service called TX Global, and I bring it up here because I'm going to be using it as the basis to walk through our intel sourcing approach for wildfires, some of the alerting protocols, and visualizations. TX Global is a very, very highly streamlined dashboard and alerting service that delivers global security news and alerts and supports up to 5 users in an organization. So while it does not offer the rich customization, extra features like brand monitoring, and large team support of TX360, it is built to do 3 things really well. It provides easy, instant-on access, and this is done through online subscription credit card activation. It provides robust global alerting, and it supports organizations of all size with a really low price point, starting at $99 a month. And to that first point, this easy onboarding is activated through TX Global by the user, and it follows a very simple process. It walks the user through 2 questions. What do you care about, and where do you care about it? To the second point, robust global alerting. When you receive alerts, you want to receive the most pertinent and the most actionable intelligence, and you want to filter out the rest. So TX Global Smart Alerts deliver information according to profile selections and settings, and pulls from a range of sources, including our in-house Analyst curated global feed, as well as a variety of premium machine automated sources. And they allow selection of regions, topics, asset locations, and they're sent in real time to text or email. Also allows for the selection of regions around the world. From a topic standpoint, TX Global enables a selection from a range of topics, including natural disasters and wildfires, but also health and infrastructure, global travel. These are general topics, and all the information is general, delivered to anybody who's subscribed to those topics. Just a note about COVID. We've been monitoring COVID-19 from day one as it spread around the world, and have been alerting out through our Analyst curated channels regarding the closures, travel shutdowns, city and state rulings, and then moving into more specific guidelines like masks requirements and gathering restrictions. And we do this with a variety of open sources, including CDC, the State Department, OSAC, and numerous international sources. But as things reopen, it will be especially important to track the status of things going in the other direction, including all those mentioned, the state guidelines, the country guidelines, the travel restrictions. And if you do have questions about this in particular, please don't hesitate to contact me following the webinar. We would be happy to talk through that in more detail. So the third piece, adding location. So in our terminology, assets can be any physical location. So during this setup process, users can input their asset locations or physical addresses to enable proximity alerting. In this way, alerts can be filtered to only send within a set radius of their specific asset locations. So TX Global supports between 3 and 50 assets depending on the tier of service that's selected. Okay, so that's an overview of the TX Global tool. Now we're going to talk about sourcing. So our services include premium Analyst curated alerts from a global perspective, as well as machine automated feeds from key vetted sources. Our Analyst curated feed covers all hazards, and it is known for being very timely in the delivery of that information. All the information in that feed has been vetted, geotagged, and categorized by our team of analysts. We do also include some valuable machine automated sources, and these cover, the key weather and disaster alerts that many of you look to as a source of truth: the National Weather Service, the USGS, and the Hurricane Center, while also providing additional value and information added to keep them targeted and filtered to your preferences. So we run them through our proprietary machine automation process to add on a rich automated geotagged layer that can be filtered based on location or more precisely a set proximity to your assets. Okay, so let's talk about wildfire sources and what we're monitoring for this particular threat. Our analyst team is sourcing, streamlining, and filtering information for this category, as well as many others. But this is, of interest to everyone. So whether it's something you're looking up on your own via the web through our tools, these are some key sources for wildfires. TX360, our platform, does have the ability to incorporate additional sources. So where we may, automate the delivery of information from the sources that you see here, and as advised by our analyst in TX360, you may have even more hyper-local or specific feeds that you want to monitor and incorporate, and that can be done through that enterprise platform. So for a single pane of glass, we offer a common operating picture like this one you see on the screen, our North America Wildfire Monitor. This is aggregating a variety of hand-selected sources for incoming information and alert feeds. Our enterprise platform TX360 provides a means to also drill into client-specific views and customize monitoring. For example, once a major fire or regional season kicks off, you may be spinning up specific dashboards focused on a region of interest, a county of interest, and the associated alerts tracking those announcements, evacuation notices, power issues, as well as visualizing the geographic spread of the fire, and all of this with a view to proximity to your assets. So we'll come back to dashboards in a few minutes, but I wanted to just give you a glimpse of the types of alerts that are included here. This one is a review of a recent day of wildfire alerts in our TX Global Wildfires feed. Our analyst curated events come from a variety of sources, and these may include local county fire districts, state forest services, or local breaking news sources. And they're often delivered from through those official Twitter accounts or Facebook pages or news accounts. And our analyst team is vetting those and publishing those through our wildfires feed. This also provides a map view of the wildfire alerts, and that makes it easy to see not only the timeline of related incidents, but also a quick visualization of the location of those. So alert automation is a really important aspect of the alerting, and that is based on your settings, these are automatically sent out to email or text accordingly. These include the event title, incident description, links for more information, as well as a map with event location. It's a very quick and targeted snapshot of the alert. Smart alert examples here. I wanted to highlight the range of the types of events that may come through this feed. And in an example here is a brush fire that may impact a major freeway, as well as an evacuation notice. And so the range of these is not just that a fire has begun, but it's evacuations, it's power outages, maybe even high winds or updates. So asset proximity alerting, this is an example here. We're looking at a wildfire alert from last week. And this is a 10,000 acre fire that burned in Arizona near the Grand Canyon. So alerts set up for proximity will include additional information, such as you see here, rich graphics, and then proximity to nearest assets. This is an expanded view of that same asset proximity, and this will include nearby assets, the map view, property sets, and those property sets convey a set of category information for each alert, such as threat type, severity, location type, etc. Inside the app, those smart alerts are aggregated in a list view, and you can scan through them easily there. You can expand them. You can also view them in the map view. Here you'll see represented a blend of different alerts, including a national weather update, a couple of wildfire announcements. And so that can be really targeted to your interests to create a complete intel picture at a glance. And the colorization scheme here helps indicate urgency level as well as distance to assets. Alerts can be shared directly from the app to other users and to other email addresses, and they can also be shared from dashboards, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. When you're sharing an alert, the user can designate the urgency. You can send to other users if you're in a shared account, but also to outside email addresses. And you can also add messages. So let's return to the dashboard topic briefly. Dashboards provide that visualization and common operating picture that can be shared throughout an organization. And they do offer 24/7 monitoring of the topic or the region. So this is a unique global or local threat profile or even a crisis scenario. In TX Global, the dashboards are all pre-configured for every user. We are including all of our COVID-19 monitors for free for all tiers right now. It's just such an important and critical time for that information to be available. The global regional monitors are available to all, and then we offer various topical monitors such as the wildfire monitor, severe weather, aviation, and health. So let's take a quick look at our severe weather monitor. This one highlights the broader range of weather, but even disaster threats that our service is monitoring 24/7. And it is made available in the alerting form that we have been reviewing on this webinar, as well as this shared dashboard view here. So we're pulling from both automated sources and our Analyst curated feeds to produce a robust, well-rounded coverage picture for clients. And in the current landscape of wildfires, COVID, and then disaster season coming on, it's just super important to have all that information available, ready, up to date, and viewable by your team. This one covers a range of security threats, and it's relevant to most clients, all hazards. And the nice thing here is that this asset visualization is an option. So you'll see these purple pins here. You can show your assets on the map, and in that way get a snapshot view of where threats may be in relation to your locations. This dashboard's aggregating multiple data types and feeds, of course. So we've got the Analyst curated feed, we've got news, social media, RSS feeds, as well as emergency, police, fire. And then for Tier 3 subscribers in TX Global, this can be shared amongst the team. So before I wrap up, just a brief note about TX360, because I did mention it several times in this discussion. It is a very powerful tool that can help bring in both the global and the hyperlocal intelligence needed to monitor these types of complex situations and what it looks like we'll be facing in the near future. In terms of wildfire monitoring, TX360 provides a tool set to stand up customized dashboards once that wildfire has become significant or other crisis has arisen. So in order to monitor specifics such as hashtags for a given fire, local fire tower cameras, local traffic cameras, the GIS overlays of the fires. The example here, this is a custom dashboard built last year around the power shutoffs in California. So it was tracking, county by county status, a GIS overlay, as well as useful links and updates. So this is an example of that type of customization. Others would be, drilling in on a specific fire. Ventura was a great example of that. So TX360 is an option supporting hundreds of users, hundreds of asset locations, as well as all these additional features I mentioned. as well as brand monitoring and custom feed integration. So if you have a need for that type of tool or just any interest in learning more about that, please feel free to drop me a note after the webinar, and we'd be more than happy to talk through how we might help you and support your team with that technology. To summarize TX Global and the wildfires, we are highlighting just a few key takeaways here on how to handle this upcoming wildfire and disaster season, even amid this global pandemic. So automating your threat monitoring, it delivers amazing efficiencies for a team. All of that, Googling for the latest updates on any given topic, a daily check-in of 12 different websites, or whatever your current may be, this can really bring it together into an automated and scalable option for you. It's easy to use, easy to start up, and it does incorporate both it leverages the power of a team of analysts as well as the machine automation piece. So you can get all of those reliable sources and official updates that you rely on automatically, as well as the insight from the analyst team, and have that all be filtered and targeted to your team's preferences. On top of that, the 24/7 dashboards provide that ongoing common operating picture that can be shared across teams and can help you manage all of these compounding threats, not just the wildfires, but the upcoming hurricane season, as well as the COVID-19 changes and disruptions as those continue to roll out. So TX Global can offer an automated, organized, accessible resource to let you be prepared, manage all this information, collaborate, and overall just raise the intelligence level across the organization. And the good news with COVID is that all indications are we're heading into recovery mode. Clearly, this will not be without challenges, but if you're here today, that means you're well on your way to increasing your preparedness and navigating through this very complex landscape. There's definitely a much higher level of risk this year with this COVID landscape, plus the crisis fatigue that has set in from various directions. So the importance of preparation cannot be emphasized more. Communication, as everybody probably has already learned, is key to keep teams going, motivated on top of this. And then really utilizing tools that can help you effectively find and isolate the key information that's needed. And all of this with the goal to helping raise the situational awareness and improve the risk mitigation and response time with that proactive threat monitoring. So that we will wrap up with that, and wanted to just thank you again for being here, for walking through this with us. I would be more than happy to answer questions, and as well as any, drop me a line. My email address is here after the call with anything specific. So with that, I will turn to Miranda and see if we had any Q&A come up today.
Hi, Julie. I have a few questions coming in here. So to start, the question is, how is the information that TX Global provides different than what I can find on the news?
That's great. So we do rely on news sources for some of our alerts, and that can range from global sources that you may not normally have access to. The cyclone right now would be a good example, where our analyst team is then identifying that key source with the best update and pushing it out through the feed. It may also be local breaking news about a fire that is in first in a Twitter feed from a breaking news local journalist, and before it hits the major headlines. So we're capturing a wide range of news, but we're also bringing in the official feeds from various government based organizations, public sector organizations, both in the US and abroad. as well as information from a variety of social media streams and RSS feeds to provide a really rich but still a vetted source of information.
We have another question, and it says, as some states reopen their economies and ease COVID-19 related restrictions, will all this remain relevant? Will TX Global still remain utilizable?
And that is a great question on top of everybody's mind, I'm sure. I know that you have been, daily in the midst of it. Would you like to tackle this question, Miranda?
Yeah, sure. So will TX Global still remain utilizable? Yes, of course. TX360 is a dynamic platform, and if there's anything I've learned over the past few years, it's always something. Even in the past 24 hours, we've had thousands of people evacuating after these dam failures in Michigan. And like you mentioned, the cyclone in the Bay of Bengal has now made landfall. So, it doesn't matter if it's COVID-19 now or wildfires in the next few months. TX360 and TX Global and the team of analysts here are always preparing for the next big thing.
Mm-hmm. So true.
We have another question here. Is there a way for me to easily share the alerts with my team if they are not signed up for the product?
Yeah, so definitely. Clearly you can forward those email alerts to your team members, but there's also several ways within the app itself where you can share directly, and that can be to other users, but also to outside email addresses. So definitely, and we encourage it.
Absolutely. Okay. Another question says, fire and weather events happen at all hours of the day. Is this content available 24/7?
You want to tackle that one?
Sure. So is this content available 24/7? It is. So like Julie has mentioned, TX360, TX Global dashboards, and those common operating pictures are available 24/7. And smart alerts as well. They don't rely solely on the internal team of analysts, but also hundreds and thousands of automated channels from official organizations and groups like NIFC and CAL FIRE and INCIWeb, as well as thousands of local, state, and federal officials and news outlets posting updates on social media and official feeds. And those happen at all hours, and they can be automatically filtered and distributed to users 24/7, which is obviously critical for a lot of these wildfire incidents where developments happen so quickly and often overnight.
Yeah, for sure.
One last question I have here. The existing dashboards seem like a great resource. Do you update them and create new ones as severe weather events happen?
Mm-hmm. So the TX Global, the dashboards that are included for all users there are constantly maintained and updated. They do have automated 24/7 content going there, but also our team of analysts is continually, adding and adapting those as needed. We will be adding new dashboards through that subscription as needed. Don't know for sure what those may be depending on the conditions, but probably a hurricane or two. But primarily where we see updating and customization of dashboards is in that TX360 platform. And I highlighted one of those, the PG&E power shutoffs, but also the idea that as a Southern California fire ramps up, we may spin up a dashboard that's customized there, and clients of that platform can do the same. So if you have a key area of concern, whether it's Canada, the US, or Australia, you can actually spin up a dashboard, select your content, your areas of interest, and create those on the fly. So it's very flexible in that way. Yes and yes, I would say on that question.
Great points.
So it sounds like is that it on the questions?
That's it on the questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Miranda, and appreciate your time today. Especially would appreciate any thoughts or feedback on the webinar and any other questions or even topics that might be important to you in the future. Welcome the communication there. So thank you so much, and wish you the best this week. Bye-bye.